All right, and so we will continue today with looking at the Buddhist teachings in one verse, but as we normally start a session with correcting a motivation in terms of refuge and bodhicitta, let's just first off spend a few seconds or 1 minute in just settling our mind, creating a sacred space for our discussion today. And we are going to start the session with refuge as a way of making sure that our discussion for today is going to contribute to our causes for going for refuge and not only becoming liberated from samsara, but also blooming into a state of Buddhahood. And as we want to bloom into a state of Buddhahood, of course, bodhicitta is absolutely important. And so we are going to correct our motivation in terms of refuge and bodhicitta. So let's take a few seconds to come down. Taking 2 or 3 breaths, thinking of withdrawing the mind from the outside world into our inner space. Shifting our attention to the body, making sure that there is no tension in the body, no discomfort. And if we do find a point which is uncomfortable, a bit tense, try gently to relax it. And if it helps, you can breathe it out. Now we're going to turn our attention to the breathing cycle and count a cycle of 21 breaths. And with each breath, we can feel our mind expanding in our inner space, inviting a greater degree of relaxation, but also stability and clarity for 21 breaths. And in correcting our mind with refuge and bodhicitta, correcting our motivation, thinking of the 2 causes for going for refuge. First one is fear. Now, it's not a debilitating type of fear, but fear that arises from understanding our samsaric situation, in thinking that I do not want to remain for eternity in a cycle of birth and death, and a lot of experiences of suffering in between, suffering of birth, of sickness, of aging and death, suffering of looking for something and not being able to find it, suffering of continuously being separated again and again from things that cause us pleasure, and the suffering of encountering repeatedly things that cause us displeasure. And all the types of suffering that we experience in samsara are based on this body that we have, which conditions us to the experience of suffering in this and future lives. And the reason that we are born into a body such as this is the control, the bondage of karma and afflictions. Anger, attachment, and ignorance that dominate our mind. And the actions that we take motivated by afflictions that throw us repeatedly into an endless cycle of samsara. And so to live our samsaric existence, we need to break free from a mind that has no control, that is under the control of anger, attachment, and ignorance. To develop a liberated mind, not only for our sake, for our own sake, but for the sake of all other living beings. A mind that has no limitation, no afflictions, a mind that is fully expanded in love and compassion. We take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. So go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dhamma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. All right. Okay. And so we've been looking at the Buddha's teachings in one verse. Let's put it again on the screen. Commit no negative action, perform perfect virtuous action, subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teachings of the Buddha. And in looking at this verse, I created this a rough diagram of progression of subduing a mind thoroughly. So the third line says subdue your mind thoroughly, and we said that we wanted to subdue our mind thoroughly because happiness and suffering all arise from the mind. And so to subdue our mind thoroughly, we have been looking at the steps of subduing the mind. First of all, developing an understanding of our mind. We spoke about it in our previous session. Not only developing an academic understanding or information about what the mind is, but also through our own personal experience of sitting with the mind, meditating on the mind, coming to recognize positive and negative states of mind, we develop an understanding of the mind. Then the next phase of subduing a mind is avoiding encounters with objects that fuel our affliction. So we spoke about it in the previous week. And we have been looking at taking up ethics, ethical discipline. And the first two lines in this verse, looking at it again, commit no negative action, perform perfect virtuous action, primarily come under the banner of taking up ethical discipline. And so we're going to continue today with discussion of ethical discipline. Then we're going to start looking at applying local antidotes to the afflictions. And the last two phases of subduing a mind thoroughly is cultivating the concentration of shamatha and developing wisdom, mainly the wisdom of emptiness. And so we're still looking at stage 3. And so are we ready to continue? Any questions or things that arose from our previous discussion? All right. And so in the previous session, we discussed ethical discipline that abstains from the 10 known virtues. And I think that one of the things that I said is that when we decide to go for refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, we commit ourselves to a type of behavior, to ethical discipline, which abstains from actions which are harmful to ourselves and actions which are harmful to others. And so the very basic ethics that we take up is called ethical discipline of abstention. So there are 10 non-virtues including within that. So we have 7 actions of body and speech, and those are the main actions that we have that we use, unfortunately, in harming others. And then we have the mental non-virtues, covetousness, malice, and wrong views. And they are the motivations that cause us unwillingly to perform non-virtuous actions of body and speech. And so we don't need a separate vow. We don't have a separate vow for taking up ethics of abstention. It's built in within our Buddhist practice. But then the next phase in taking up ethics in order to subdue our mind thought is taking up ethics in terms of vows. So this is what I wanted to touch upon today. And so within the vows that we take upon ourselves as Buddhists, there are 3 tiers or 3 layers. First layer is called personal liberation. It's number 1, or in Sanskrit, pratimoksha. The second level of vows, or vow, is called the Bodhisattva vow, and the 3rd level is called the Tantric vow. So first off, within the group of vows of personal liberation, we have 7 or 8 vows. So to begin with, we have the refuge vow, or the vow of approaching virtue. And so if we decide to become Buddhists, and I assume that many of you are Buddhist, maybe some of you are not. I hope that I'm Buddhist as Buddhist monk. I hope that I'm doing it properly. But anyway, the way to become Buddhist is to decide in a heart, in our mind, that the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha are the things that we rely upon in order to accomplish our state of liberation. So one of the teachings of the Buddha, teachings on refuge, it was said that the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha are objects of refuge for those who are seeking liberation, which means that what directs our Buddhist practice is not mainly the type of pleasure and comfort and happiness and well-being and mental quiescence and mental health and so forth, mainly directed at this life, but we become mainly concerned about what will happen to us in future lifetimes and beyond. Of course, we can use a Buddhist practice to make this life better mental health. There's nothing wrong with that. It's actually a good outcome of our practice, but the reason for becoming Buddhist is not mainly for developing mental health or well-being in this life. That's a secondary outcome. It's a byproduct of focusing on future lifetimes, the state of liberation, and the state of enlightenment. And so going for refuge underpins all of our Buddhist practice, and it is the essence of refuge is relying upon, with trust and faith, relying upon the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. But then we can also decide to institutionalize our refuge, and that would be in terms of making a commitment. And the essence of going for refuge, the essence of the refuge vow, is to make a commitment to go for refuge from this time on and for the rest of our life until the time of death. So at the beginning of my life as Buddhist, when I decided that the Buddhist path is something that is suitable for me, I didn't have a lot of knowledge and a lot of information. And I've done a refuge ceremony, and I've done it multiple times without really understanding what the commitment was when I was going for refuge. And part of not understanding what the commitment was we were doing recitations in Tibetan. We're doing it with a Tibetan master, Tibetan Lama. And that's the limitation. That's the benefit, first of all, of doing it. The benefit is having a qualified master, having a tradition that was passed on through many centuries, We have the blessings of the lineage, so there's a lot of benefit with that. But also the language barrier is such that it was making it really difficult to understand what the commitment was when I was, the commitment I was taking upon myself. And so when we take upon ourselves the refuge vow, we say, I go for refuge from this time on and for the rest of my life to the Buddha, the supreme amongst humans, to the Dhamma, the one that is free from attachment, to the Sangha, the supreme amongst the community. And then that is the actual, so this is the actual vow, to go for refuge for the rest of our life. But then we can also top up our vow. We can top it up with making a promise to abstain from 5 things. So this is where we get to a point of confusion in the English translation of vows. In general, we don't have 5 different vows for refuge. We have 5 things that we can decide to give up. But the vow itself is to go for refuge for the rest of our life. Then we can also make a promise to give up killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, intoxicants, and lying. So this is the vow. So this is the vow of. So this vow is called the refuge vow, or sometimes it is also called the vow of approaching virtue, Genyin in Tibetan. This vow belongs to a class of vows that are called personal liberation. But there are also other vows that belong to this class, ordination vows. So we have different types of ordination. We have ordination, novice ordination for monks and nuns, and full ordination for monks and nuns. And there is also another vow of ordination, which is ordination training, vow of training in order to become fully ordained. And then we have an additional vow, which is called one-day vow. Now, in the Tibetan tradition, the one-day vow is not practiced extensively. We have, instead of that, we have another vow that is called, or another practice that is called the 8 Mahayana precepts. So when we take up the one-day vow within the Pratimoksha vow, we take it up mainly with a Hinayana motivation. We want to keep pure ethics for one day, at least try our best to live in a lifestyle that is similar to monks and nuns, and we want to do it for one day, as creating causes for our own state of liberation. That's a one-day vow. But then since Tibetan Buddhism is a Mahayana Buddhism, instead of doing that with a Hinayana motivation, we do it with a Mahayana motivation, taking the 8 Mahayana precepts. Anyway, even within vows of ordination, like novice ordination and full ordination, we don't have many different vows which are included within that. There is one vow. Like, for example, when I became fully ordained, the vow was to remain fully ordained for the rest of my life. There are 253 rules that I need to keep in order to maintain my ordination vow. Not all the rules are of the same importance. Some of them are crucial, and some of them are not as important. What is crucial are called the four roots. So avoiding killing, stealing, lying, and for monastic sexual activities. But also within that, there are different flavors, different activities that can damage the vow or that can cause me to break the vow. Like, for example, for you guys, if you've taken the refuge vow, or for me, as an ordained monk, if I kill a mosquito, it's a negative action. It is an action of harming others. It is not something that causes us to break the vow. It damages the vow, but it is not a breakage of a vow. To break the vow, we need to murder someone, to have an intentional, I wouldn't say premeditated, but let's say an intentional murder. To murder another human being. to break the vow of lying, in a sense that we completely lose the vow, we need to tell a lie, claiming that we have attained superhuman abilities through a practice. Like, for example, that we have attained calm abiding, that we have realized emptiness, that we have generated bodhicitta, knowing that we haven't done that. If we have attained calm abiding, if we have generated bodhicitta and so forth, and we tell it to others, there's a fault in that. We can become proud, or we can use that in order to deceive others, to control others, and so forth. And therefore, we're not encouraged to speak about the spiritual attainments to others. But it does not constitute breaking the vow in terms of lying. If we think that we have realized emptiness, if we think that we have attained calm abiding, we truly believe so, and we tell it to others, it is not breaking. It is not a breaking of our vow. But if we wish to deceive others, in order to gain some benefit, personal benefit for ourselves, for people that are close to us, if you want to assemble some retinue and so forth, that constitutes a breaking of a vow. So altogether, the first layer of vows is called vows of personal liberation. This first level of vows, consisting of the refuge or approaching virtue vow, ordination vows, one-day vow. This vow is common to both Mahayana and Hinayana. Mahayana practitioners like us take them, but also Hinayana practitioners take them. Then we have two more level of vows. We have the Bodhisattva vow and the Tantric vow. So again, the vow itself is one vow. Like, for example, when we take the Bodhisattva vow, the nature of the vow, the commitment that we take upon ourselves is to not relinquish bodhicitta until we attain enlightenment. But on top of that, we also commit ourselves to train in all the perfections of bodhisattva, not to leave even a single stone unturned in order to attain the state of enlightenment. That is the vow that we make. What causes us to break the vow are the 18 root downfalls. And in order to avoid the 18 root downfalls, we have 46 secondary offenses that we need to protect against, that we need to guard against. If we guard well against the 46 secondary offenses, we'll have a better ability to guard against the 18 root downfalls. And if we do so, we maintain the Bodhisattva vow. And it continues not only in this life, it also continues from this lifetime to the next, up until enlightenment. So that's the Bodhisattva vow. The Tantric vow, again, is one vow. We also keep it until we attain the state of enlightenment in the framework of the Vajrayana. And there are also some other root downfalls, some heavy offenses, which are related to the tantric practice. So, since we are now speaking of guarding ethical discipline, taking up ethics as a way of subduing the mind, what we then do in terms of ethics is, first of all, gather information. As I said before, I've taken vows so many times before without knowing what I was into. Not only the refuge vow, but also the Bodhisattva vow. I took it multiple times without knowing what's in the fine print. I took it so many times without knowing that there are 18 root downfalls and 46 secondary offenses. Has it happened to you also? Or am I the only one in this group?
Yes,
Mike,
it has.
All right. Yeah. Well, as it happens, I think it happens to us, people that come from outside the Buddhist tradition in general, or the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. We start going to a Buddhist center. We have Buddhist friends, and then there is a Lama in the vicinity that is coming to the neighborhood, coming to the center. And everyone tells us that it's really good to go and take an empowerment. It's really good to take a vow. It's really good to take the Bodhisattva vow. We never know when we're going to get that opportunity ever again. And it's good to die with those vows in our continuum and yada, yada, yada. We are encouraged to do it. And, I did it so many times. I wouldn't say coerced, or I haven't taken them under duress, but I've taken vows before without knowing what's the big deal. What's in the package. Only once I joined the team at Chimeric Institute and started to work with one of the geshes at the center, and then studied more properly. Then I started to look at the fine prints of all the commitments that I've made before. And so that's, I think, what happens to most of us. So, what happened before it has happened, what we can do looking at the future is at least make sure that we improve, that we build on the things that we have done so far. And so guarding ethical discipline in order to guard the vows that we have taken, we first of all need to know the procedure in general, what is expected of us when we approach a Lama, when we approach a certain event in which vows are going to be given. So to know the procedure more or less. But also we need to know what the vows include. This is the most important thing, knowing what's included within the package of the vows so that we can make an informed decision. This is tricky. It is tricky because what is expected of us as lay practitioners, for you guys as lay practitioners, when you take the refuge vow, you can learn about it, you can discuss it, you can ask questions, and take the vow when you're fully ready, when you think that I can do it, I can keep it for the rest of my life, and I do it because I want to do it. With ordination vow, it's slightly different. With ordination vow, of course, we take ordination when we, out of our own choice. No one forces us to do it. And when I took ordination, I knew what's expected of me. And I was also lucky because I've been working at a time. I'd been working at a time with fully qualified geshes, and I had some teachings on monastic discipline before I had to translate for those teachings. So I knew pretty much what was expected of me. But in general, when you become ordained, you shouldn't be taught. You're not supposed to be taught what the things are that you're committed to before ordination. You do it, let's say, blind, with a blindfold. You do it blindly. Of course, we know that when you take ordination, you don't grow your hair. No, you need to kind of wear 16th century fashion robes designed by Tsongkhapa and so forth. I don't know if actually Tsongkhapa was the one that designed the robes, but it's pretty much a 16th century thing. Then, of course, no intimate relationships. But then with the vow of full ordination, I have 253 things I need to avoid. Most of them I didn't know before I took the vow. I was only permitted to learn what the 253 things were only after I took ordination.
Why? I mean, I understand why you did that. That if the goal is you want to become a monk, then you figure you just have to ignore the small print because you're going to do it. But I'm just wondering why that's the way the system is written, or why that's a thing.
I think that there are a couple of reasons for that. The first reason, I think, that is in order to not discourage others from becoming monastics, in a sense of when if you're being told, I mean, maybe I'm saying that with a little bit of sarcasm, or maybe I'm being a little bit cynic, but some people become really uptight about the vow, about trying to keep everything pure, 253 things completely pure, and it's impossible. It's impossible for us to keep everything pure, because had we been able to do so, there would have been no reason to take the vow. Now, if naturally, spontaneously, my mind would have been pure, and I would have been able to guard all the things that I need to abstain from, there's no reason to take the vow. But then when you start to look into the different details, it can become daunting. And I've encountered quite a few people over the years that were trying as much as possible to keep everything pure, and in that process, they became too uptight. And unfortunately for some, they became so uptight that they thought that if I can't keep everything pure, there's no benefit in remaining ordained. So that's, I think, maybe one reason. I'm not sure that that's the main reason. But the second reason is to prevent an unhealthy relationship between, I guess, communities of monastics and non-monastics, in that, had it been allowed for people to learn all the ins and outs of the ordination vow, I think that there would be more opportunities for the lay community to become critical of monastic community. And it's not, I guess, not healthy for lay community, not healthy for the monastic community, not healthy for the relationship between them. And so I think that that's probably one of the main reasons that those vows were considered to be vows that should be known only for monastics. Of course, within a monastic community, when you see your peers behaving in a way that is not really suitable to the ordination vow, within the community, there are procedures and rules in which you can keep people in the system and help them to become better in their practice of ethical discipline. But over the years also, even at Chimrezik Institute, which has a community of monastics, but also a community of lay practitioners, at difficult times, I could see that some of the disharmony was pretty much based on developing a critical approach, becoming too critical of each other. So I guess that to remove that level of criticism and become more harmonious in communities of practitioners, it's better for monastics to know what they need to be doing and discuss it within themselves. So the lay community also to know what they need to be doing, of course, but also to be able to work together without being too critical. Does it make sense? Cool. And so that's the first level, the Pratimoksha vows. Second level of vows is called the Bodhisattva vow. And again, it's one vow, as I said, the nature of which is to commit ourselves to not relinquish bodhicitta until we attain the heart of enlightenment, but also the vow itself is also related to engaging bodhicitta in practice. Then we also commit ourselves to do whatever the previous Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have done before. We'll do just the same in order to attain the essence of enlightenment. So with the Bodhisattva vow, we can study all the ins and outs of the Bodhisattva vow. We can study what are the 18 root downfalls and the 46 secondary offenses, and then make a conscious decision that we are up to the task, that we are committing ourselves to guard the Bodhisattva vow until we attain the state of enlightenment. So we can do it with the refuge vow. We can study the vow with the refuge vow. So for you guys, for lay practitioners, you can study whatever you want to, whatever you need to do before you take the vow. But also with the Bodhisattva vow, you can do that. With the Tantric vow, again, it's a different matter. The Tantric vow is taken in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, mostly when you take upon yourself highest yoga tantra empowerment. There are not many yoga tantra empowerments in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, So most of us will have encountered Hatha Yoga Tantra empowerments that come with the vow. For the lower classes of Tantra, which means that if we get a simple empowerment of Chenrezig or Tara or Manjushri and so forth, we're not taking upon ourselves the vow. It only comes with Hatha Yoga Tantra empowerment, such as Yamantaka, Goya Samaja, Vajrayogini, and other Chakra Sambhara, and other Hatha Yoga Tantra empowerments. With them, we're taking the Tantric vow. And again, with the Tantric vow, we're not supposed to learn all the details before we take the vow. We can only study the vow after we have taken it. And so, in order to get pure ethical discipline in terms of vows, so I said that we need to understand the procedure of taking the vow. We need to understand what's included within the vow as much as we can. Not always it is possible. So at least we have the rough outline of the vow. And then we also need to know how to guard the vow. And how to guard the vow is not only knowing what are the things which are incongruous with the vow, what are the things which are contrary to guarding our vows, 18 root downfalls, or the 5 things that we have decided to give up once we're taking refuge, and so on and so forth. But we also need to become conscientious. So to become conscientious or careful or mindful, it means that we need to, first of all, not only know the training, but we also need to continuously in our practice to reduce our attachment, to reduce our hostility, to develop wisdom in order to reduce our wisdom, to develop joyous effort in our practice of guarding the vow, but also to constantly guard the mind against contamination, which means against afflictive states of mind. One of the main things that will cause us to break the vows that we have is attachment. And so, not only attachment, of course, anger would also cause us to break the vows that we have. And so we need to be on guard, to remember what we've committed ourselves to do, to be invested in virtue, to develop joyous effort, which is totally enthused about doing the right thing, doing positive things, to reduce our attachment, anger, and so forth, as I said just now. So this is conscientiousness, kind of all this package of having no anger, no attachment, no ignorance, to be enthused about virtue, and also to guard the minds against contamination. This is conscientiousness. That's the foundation for guarding our ethics. But then in our kind of the tools that we use in order to guard our ethical discipline are mindfulness and vigilance. Now, mindfulness is such a popular term at the moment, at this day and age. There's so many different types of mindfulness, but the Buddhist tradition takes a really simple approach to mindfulness. The word for mindfulness in Tibetan is Tremba. And Tremba in Tibetan has a variety of meanings. All of them, I think, can come together to form our understanding of what mindfulness is. And so Tremba in Tibetan means remembering. So, for example, remembering the instructions, remembering what we should be doing and what we should not be doing. And to remember, of course, we need to know what it is. Now, without knowing, as I said before, I've taken vows so many times before, without knowing the fine prints. Not only the fine prints, without knowing even the coarse letters, the words, the sentences, the things that I need to guard against. So, Temba, remembering. In order to remember, we need to know. The actual definition of Tremba, by the way, as a mental factor, a mental process, is non-forgetfulness. So in order to not forget something, it needs to be familiar to us. It is a non-forgetfulness of a familiar thing. We need to have heard about it. We need to have studied it. We need to have become aware of it in order to not remember it, in order to not forget it, sorry. So that's one perspective of Tremba, of mindfulness. Another usage of the word Tremba is a thought. If you're thinking, you're Tremba in Tibetan. you're doing the chamber. So in that sense, we need to, in order to guard the ethics that we have, we need to think about it. We need to become mindful. We need to be aware of what we should be giving up. We need to be scrutinizing our behavior. We need to know that, a certain behavior is not what we committed ourselves to do. We need to know that we are violating our commitments, that we're creating negative actions, and so on and so forth. There's some conceptual process that happens to us in our mind when we guard our ethical discipline. Anyway, mindfulness in terms of remembering. So Shella is asking, is it, okay, so it is. So this is how you would spell it in English, but you don't say dren, you say there's a, the way that you announce it in Tibetan, you announce something that doesn't exist in English. So chen or jen, it's like a retroflex sound, chemba. All right, and so this chemba is remembering. And so remembering, not only remembering the instructions, but also now you can say, remember what we need to do at the moment. And in order to make sure that our mind is still kept in tow, we have vigilance or introspection. That which spies upon the mind and every so often or every once in a while, and checks that the mind is indeed doing what it's supposed to be doing. And so I think that we have been using that either intentionally or unintentionally, knowingly or unknowingly in the meditations that we do. We start a meditation. I assume that, I suppose that many of you in your meditation, you're trying first of all to create this space in your mind where your mind is focused. You're either focusing on the breath, focusing on physical sensations, you're focusing on the mind. And so there is this mental process by which you're aware of what's happening now. You're aware, your body, you're knowingly meditating on your mind, on your body, you're knowingly meditating on mind. And then there is the kind of the knowing process, which the vigilant process, the introspection process, in which every once in a while, you're still checking that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. That's vigilance or introspection. So there's still mindfulness and vigilance, introspection are the main things that we use in order to gather ethical discipline. And so, for example, during the day, when I hang out with others, I have conversations with others. As it happens, when I hang out with my friends, we sometimes end up gossiping about others, speaking about others. It's so easy to, in that conversation, to fall prey to gossip and then to become critical of others, to ridicule others, that's what we do in human interactions with our friends, family, and so forth. And it is a non-virtuous action, adult talk, the one that gives rise to, the one that conditions afflictive states of mind. And so this is where mindfulness and introspection need to kick in order to guard our ethical discipline. So, for example, introspection, vigilance, discovers that we're now spending time in conversation in which we dig out the faults of others, or conversations about things which fuel our sense of attachment, or conversations about things which fuel a sense of hostility, unhappiness, anger, and so forth. So we become aware that we're doing that, and then mindful of the training that we have decided to take up. Mindfulness of, for example, deciding to give up on idle chatter or meaningless chatter. So we then decide, when we become mindful of that, we can decide to set it aside, to reduce it, to change the direction that the conversation is going, or at least in our mind, sometimes we don't have to exhibit some form of behavior outside. We can, in our mind at least, apply an antidote to that and stop that mental interest, conversation, agitation, and infatuation with the topic of conversation. So mindfulness and alertness are crucial. Mindfulness and alertness, introspection are crucial for guarding ethical discipline, without which there's no way to guard ethical discipline. Now, if you read or if you study Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, in chapter 4 and 5 in that text, there are a lot of instructions on first of all, guarding conscientiousness, which is, let's say, the foundation for our ethics, and then the methods that we use on the ground to guard it, which is mindfulness and alertness. But then, as I said, our mind is not perfect. My mind is still conditioned by afflictive states of mind. Even if I don't want anger to arise, or hostility to arise, it arises in certain situations. There was, when I arrived at Chenrezig Institute way back, I thought to myself, everything's going to be perfect living at a Buddhist center. It's such a conducive environment. It is a conducive environment, and it's easy to live in harmony. But oh boy, it's not that easy to live in harmony when you live in a small community. In a sense that even at the end of the day, I thought to myself that even if I find myself alone in a room for a few days, I will still find someone to pick up a fight with. Even if I find myself completely alone, I will still fight with someone. Anyway, and so there was, I think that over the years I spent at Chenrezig Institute, I can think of two people in which, I had really intense conflict with. And looking back, the things that I've said, the things that we've said to each other, is like completely maniacal. It's not a type of behavior that you think that you would find at the Buddhist center, but I've done it. I've done it all. And after that massive fallouts that I had with a couple of mates at a Buddhist center, we apologized after some time, apologized to each other, we moved on, we became friends again, but still, even with at least one person, when I think about them, or when I hear about them, there's still some kind of, sometimes like a twist in my heart. Like some kind of like, I'm stepping back from that person and I don't want to engage with them. And so I'm saying that because our mind is still conditioned by those afflictions, whether we like it or not. And therefore, it is not possible for me to guard all the vows that I have perfectly or purely. It does not mean to say that there is no benefit then in taking up ethical discipline. If I'm not going to commit myself to ethics, if I'm going to tell myself to begin with, there's no way I'm going to do it perfectly, so there's no point in doing it from the outset, there will be no way, no point in time in which I will be able to commit myself ever to ethical discipline. And so we try our best. We first of all try our best, and we have also remedial tools to correct the things that we have done. So with some of the vows that we have tools for confessing, laying down, and purifying faults that we have incurred in relation to the vows that we have. Within ordination vows, we have a practice that is called sojong. Some of you might have had it. Sojong is a kind of group practice that monastics should do twice a month if all, the community has to fulfill some prerequisites, in order for those conditions to be met, in order for the practice to be possible. But anyway, there are some things that monastics can do in order to purify faults that they've incurred in relation to the vows, in case the vow hasn't been broken completely. I mean, if I killed someone intentionally, or if I lied about my spiritual attainments, I mean, the vow is broken. There's nothing that I can do in order to repair that. But there are some other minor things that I might have done over the last couple of weeks that have damaged the vow. And I can then use this process of sojourn to confess and purify it and move forward. There are also, in relation to the Bodhisattva vow, for example, when you learn about the procedure for taking the Bodhisattva vow, one of the things that you learn about is the ability and the way to take the vow upon yourself, doing it on your own without having to rely upon a teacher or a master that is coming to your Buddhist center to do it. So you learn the procedure for doing it daily, even a few times a day, and you can do it whenever you want in order to confess the faults that you have incurred in relation to the vow and to take the vow again. So we have remedial procedures for amending mistakes that we have done or faults that we have done in relation to the vows that we have. And of course, needless to say that we have the 4 powers of the antidote, 4 antidotal powers. So the power of the basis, the power of regret, the power of turning away from wrongdoings, and the power of thorough application of antidotes. And the power of thorough application of antidotes is mainly a mental power in which we cultivate states of mind which are contrary to the afflictions that control our behavior. And so, for example, if I find myself in a heated discussion with others, if an argument, if a fight with others, and I can't control my speech, it's motivated by resentment and anger, irritation, and so forth, I can use power of antidotes in terms of, doing devotional things, doing circumambulation, doing recitation of mantras, doing Vajrasattva mantras. We normally, when teachings are being given, normally these antidotes are being mentioned, but really these are just physical or verbal manifestation of something that should occur to us in our mind. In our mind, we should apply an antidote. The antidote, if I find myself having an argument, offensive argument with others, the antidote to that in my mind would be to recognize anger, to recognize the fault of anger, the faults of anger, to recognize how anger makes me behave, causes my behavior, and then to meditate on patience, on loving kindness, on impermanence, on selflessness, and so forth. To meditate on bodhicitta, these are actual antidotes to anger. All the other things during circumambulation and so forth, we can add them to positive states of mind that we develop. But the positive states of mind that we develop should be the things that counteract the faults, the misdeeds that we have done before. So that was my spiel about taking up ethical discipline. How does it sound? Does it sound really difficult, or does it sound manageable?
Venerable, I think it sounds manageable in the sense that we should not be too hard on ourselves, and so be kind to ourselves, and then we're more likely to be kind to others.
Definitely. I mean, over the years, as I said, I met people that were too uptight about the vow. And as it happened, since I've been living in monastic communities for the last couple of decades, from time to time, I met monks and nuns that were too strict with the vows. When you become too strict with the vows, in the sense that you kind of try to keep everything pure as much as possible. And of course, we should have that attitude, at least wishing to do that, but becoming too uptight about it, it led to being too critical of oneself and too critical of others. And when we become too critical of others, then it creates disharmony between ourselves and others. But also, people that were too then critical about themselves, I think that the vast majority of them disrobed at the end. Disrobed at the end in the sense that they decided that there was no point in remaining ordained because it's just an impossible way of living. It's no longer designed for the 21st century. It's not something that we can do. It's not something that is suited for Westerners. It's not something that is suited for any Buddhist practitioners this day and age. So it's, I think, coming from a really narrow-minded perspective of wanting to be perfect. Well, our mind is very imperfect. So we try our best. But trying our best is not kind of, saying that we try our best is not enough. No, we also need to kind of make sure that we improve with mindfulness, alertness, conscientiousness, setting over years of mental development, that we just do things better. Sheila, is that your child or grandchild? Grandchild. Hi there.
Hi, Sauce.
That's us. Hello. Anyway.
Venerable, when you were talking, I kind of like was agree when Karen asked her question earlier about knowing what you're committing to. I've always thought, isn't it strange that in Buddhism we don't actually know? But as I was thinking about that as you've been talking, I also kind of realized that, yeah, when was the last time I actually committed to something that I said I know everything about this, that I knew what I was committing to, right?
Yeah.
So to me, it's like doing it the Buddhist way is actually more honest, because I don't pretend like I know, I really know everything that I'm committing to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. When I way back when I was in my 30s, I had a partner from Ireland, Sinead, and at some point she said that she decreed that I'm not marriage material, that I'm scared of commitment. And, and I thought to myself, that's spot on. It's like calling a spade a spade. And so I think that kind of from young age, I never thought of myself that kind of committing myself to relationship is something that is suitable for me. I'm definitely not marriage material. But then when I became a monk, I guess my initial reaction to that in the first few weeks and months was like, oh my God, I got married. It's like a commitment that I made for the rest of my life. And sometimes I think that unless you make that commitment, you don't know how it feels. And it's a kind of description that some of my friends were describing once they got married. I have a couple of friends that have been together for years, and then they decided to get married. And they said that once they got married and they made that commitment, that vow to remain together for the rest of their life until death do us apart, it took the relationship, the commitment, to another level. And so, although my initial response or feeling of ordination was like, oh my God, I'm now it's like getting married and being in a relationship for the rest of my life. It took me some time to get to settle into it, a few months, and now I can do it. Now I think that I can do it more naturally.
But with the Bodhisattva vow, it's until you attain enlightenment. So that's a little longer than like this lifetime. I mean, that's a long marriage. I mean, it's like kind of like the Mormons that think they say they stay forever on the planet for eons and stuff. That's a big commitment.
Yeah, actually, that's it's a beautiful parallel, you might say, between Buddhist tradition and Mormons. But if we're speaking about marriage, it's like not only we're committing ourselves to be married to a standard state of enlightenment, we are married to everyone. We're going to benefit everyone in the best possible way. We're going to love everyone. We cherish everyone more than we cherish ourselves. So so it's a beautiful commitment. But then also one of the things, just as a comment on the side, when we look at those 3 levels of vows, I'll put it again, they're also arranged according to the difficulty of keeping them. So keeping vows of personal liberation, either the refuge vow or ordination vows, is easier than keeping the bodhisattva vow. Keeping the bodhisattva vow is easier than keeping the tantric vow. And so sometimes it's interesting just in terms of our attitude. Like we think that, for example, becoming ordained is too difficult. Taking the Bodhisattva vow is easy. No, not much commitment in the Bodhisattva vow. We can kind of take it every day, but maybe I'm going to become ordained at the end of my life. But actually, it's easier to keep the ordination vow, easier to keep the refuge vow than keeping the Bodhisattva vow without losing it, without damaging it. I'm not putting you off in terms of taking the Bodhisattva vow, but it's kind of something that is good to know. The things that add up to our understanding of the commitments that we take, because as you pointed out, Karen, we make a long-term commitment, not for the rest of our life, but until we attain the heart of enlightenment. And also the type of commitment that we make is to train in all the undertakings of bodhisattvas, to practice generosity and ethics and patience and joyous effort, concentration and wisdom. And those practices are extensive and really difficult. All right. And so let's go back to this. So the stages of subduing the mind. We spoke up of taking ethics. So first point was ethics of abstention, abstaining from the 10 non-virtues, then taking vows. So 3 layers of vows: personal liberation, bodhisattva, and tantric vows, knowing the procedures, knowing what's included within the vows, then knowing how to guard them with conscientiousness, mindfulness, and alertness, and then also knowing the procedures for confessing and purifying faults that we have incurred within the vows that we have, and also practicing continuously the 4 paths of the antidotes. Those are the things that I wanted to mention, that I wanted to speak about in relation to taking up ethics. Now, actually, there's one more point that I wanted to make. So let's go back to the first 2 lines in this verse: commit no negative action and perform perfect virtuous actions. And so within the vows that we have, commit no negative actions to begin with, begins with abstaining from the 10 non-virtues. If you have taken the refuge vow, then abstaining, and you have taken, you've made a commitment to abstain from the 5 things, killing, stealing, and so forth, then you do not perform those actions which you have committed yourself not to do. If you have taken ordination, you don't commit the actions that were prescribed by the Buddha as negative, as misdeeds for ordained people. So, for example, I think I've mentioned it in a previous discussion. Drinking alcohol is not something that is negative by nature, but it is a prescribed misdeed for ordained people. So I should avoid intoxicants in general, although it's not something that is negative by nature. What do I want to say? Okay, so commit no negative action, and the intentional avoidance is a virtuous action. So the second line says, perform perfect virtuous action. To perform perfect virtuous action begins with, first of all, the motivation. So, for example, intentionally avoiding killing. I think that this is something that we naturally take up when we become Buddhists. It's not always easy,
No negative action.
Here's the definition of commit.
All right, so taking up intentional intentional abstention of non-virtuous action. So intentionally abstaining from killing, from stealing, from sexual misconduct, and so forth. I think that it's easy to abstain from murdering, from intentional killing of other human beings. That's easy. We're not homicidal most of the day, most of our life. From time to time, we want to break the neck of someone, but generally speaking, it's easier to avoid killing other human beings. But then, with other things, it becomes more difficult sometimes. Killing insects and the like, it's more difficult. But the intentional decision that I'm not going to do it, I'm going to bear with some difficulty, I'm going to take up this challenge and avoid killing as much as I can, it's a virtuous action. So I don't kill generally when I'm asleep. I might roll over and squash a mosquito or another insect, but but I don't do it intentionally. But when I'm awake, it's easier to avoid intentional killing, intentional stealing, intentional sexual misconduct, lying, divisive speech, and so forth. So motivation is the first component of performing perfect virtuous action. Then also, when we do a virtuous action, to do it perfectly, we can do it by ourselves. We can encourage others to do it, not sit around and wait for others to do it on our behalf, but to do it ourselves and to encourage others to do it. And then at the end, we feel happy about whatever we've done, and we also dedicate all the virtue that we have created in so doing. That turns the action to become perfect. But also, of course, we can add to that some components of wisdom, for example. And so it is said that when you become generous, you practice generosity. You can do that with observing the emptiness of the three spheres. So you think of yourself as the giver. You think that I'm the one who is giving. I do not exist in and of myself independently. The person that I give to also does not exist in this way. What I give, the action of giving, none of them exists in and of themselves objectively or independently. And that's also something that makes this action even not only perfect, but super perfect. It contributes in some sense both to the accumulation of merit and to the accumulation of wisdom. So as much as we can, we perform perfect virtuous action. But again, for us, it's work in progress. We cannot do everything perfectly right from the beginning. So as Susan pointed out, we need to be kind to ourselves. We need to be gentle with ourselves, not to have high expectations of ourselves, but to become really rational about our abilities. Now, with respect to the Bodhisattva vow, we said that not only the vow is to commit ourselves not to relinquish bodhicitta until we attain the heart of enlightenment, but we also commit ourselves to do all the things that the past Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have done in the past, which means to practice the six perfections, to do it just like them. And so to be generous with others, not only material generosity, but also to protect others from pain, from suffering, to share our time with others, to give someone, tell someone that they have our back, to listen to someone going through a rough time, rough day, and so forth. Opening a heart in this way is also becoming generous. Making the Dhamma available to others, not only teaching the Dhamma, but also helping the Dhamma, a Buddhist center, the Dhamma group that we belong to. So I think that some of you that are participating in some activities of Thupten Nobuling or other Buddhist centers. So doing whatever you can in order to facilitate the teachings, help a group, help your fellow Dhamma practitioners is also, you can say, under the banner of practicing generosity, of providing the Dhamma, giving the Dhamma to others. And that also, of course, has to be motivated by bodhicitta. So, and that also becomes a perfect virtuous action if the motivation, the performance, and the culmination, rejoicing, wanting to do it again, wanting to do it better, is present in those actions. So I think that with this, I said everything that I wanted to say with respect to ethics. Any questions? All right. And so let's look at then next step of subduing our mind. Applying local antidotes to the afflictions. And so before we do that, I wanted to say that I think I've said it before, that the main thing that makes it difficult for us to gather ethical discipline is attachment. Attachment to our body, attachment to others, attachment to wealth, attachment to pleasure. These are the main things that make it so difficult for us to keep our ethical discipline. And therefore, we have local antidotes to the afflictions. And I call them local antidotes because when you look at a Buddhist presentation, there's a distinction between wisdom realizing emptiness and all the other types of positive states of mind that we can develop. So wisdom that realizes emptiness, particularly when it becomes direct realization of emptiness, perceptual realization of emptiness, that type of wisdom perceptually realizing emptiness, is called the direct antidote to ignorance, to all of our afflictions. In a sense that if we develop a perceptual realization of emptiness, not only it will eliminate ignorance, the seeds of ignorance, but also all other afflictions will abate because the foundation ignorance will be stopped. So wisdom is the direct antidote. And all the other antidotes, I call them local antidotes because we apply them in certain situations, but they are not strong enough to eliminate all the seeds of the afflictions. And so, for example, I become angry with another person. The people from my past, as I said, are they're still in my heart. I haven't been able to completely find peace. Now, I don't hate them, but sometimes I just it's enough to hear the name or to think about them with this sense of disquieting feeling that comes up in my heart or in my mind. And so I can continue to meditate on anger, to meditate on patience or loving kindness and so forth. But the seeds of anger are still there. If I'm not going to get angry with that person, it is still possible for me to get angry with another person in another situation. So I will have to apply the antidote again and again. I will have to not only apply antidotes to anger in relation to this person or the other person, I will still have to also continue to meditate on other things, loving kindness and compassion and bodhicitta, including all sentient beings, developing equanimity and so on and so forth. So the direct antidote, wisdom that perceptually realizes emptiness, eliminates not only the afflictions, but also the seeds of the afflictions. So often an analogy is being given. It is said that wisdom realizing emptiness is like a fire, big fire that burns the seeds of the afflictions. Often in teachings given by Tibetan lamas, Tibetan geshes, they give that example of if fire is burning a seed, then it eliminates the potential of the seeds to bear fruit. But of course, in Australia, we have gum trees, eucalyptus trees, and the forest regenerates only after a massive fire. So a seed of a eucalyptus tree will be activated only once it is burned by fire. It's some kind of natural way for the forest to regenerate. But anyway, in general, all other antidotes, loving kindness, compassion, and so forth, they don't deal with the seeds. They don't eliminate the seeds. They eliminate or they deal with a more rudimentary function of the afflictions. So I think that in the previous session, I think it was with you guys, we spoke about two conditions that give rise to afflictions. One of them is being in close proximity to the object of the affliction. So, when I find myself in a chocolate shop, of course, massive attachment to sweets, to chocolate will rise up in my mind. If I open the cupboard and I find a tablet, a piece of chocolate, cookies or what have you, of course, attachment to that will arise. So that's the first thing that trigger afflictions, those external objects or internal conditions that can also happen. Thinking of past experience can trigger anger. Thinking of another person, which I had difficulty with in the past, triggers my anger. So that's the first condition, close proximity to an object. And the second condition is incorrect mental attention. And the incorrect mental attention is that which exaggerates positive qualities or exaggerates negative qualities. We spoke about it before, right? And so local antidotes deal mainly with that level. They tweak that incorrect mental attention and make it more precise. So let's look at attachment. And so applying antidotes to the afflictions, applying antidote to attachments. And here I came up with a list of 5 things that we can do in order to reduce our attachment. And most of those things are dealing with the incorrect mental attention, reducing the incorrect mental attentions that we pay to a certain object. But before we get to that, let's look at attachment in general. Attachment is attached to something, an object of desire, and it seeks it, it desires it in thinking that it is something that exists as desirable, as pleasurable, as wonderful in and of itself, by its own right, objectively. And then is also involved with that superimposition, exaggeration of wonderful qualities. So I think that we all have examples from our own personal life of the way that attachment operates. Attachment always comes with this disguise, with this presentation, as if it is there to help us. The sole purpose of attachment is to make us happy. In that, if I'm going to get what my mind wants, I'm going to find happiness in my life. And so attachment is really insidious. It doesn't come necessarily with this disquieting, very kind of rough, disquieting feeling. As I said before, sometimes when attachment is really strong, it comes with a sense of thirst, like amazing thirst. But it's not always it is like that. It is insidious in the sense that it can be present there all the time in one form or another, and continue to tell us how our life is going to be so much better, happier, pleasurable, more secure if we're going to get what our attachment wants. Either a new house, a new car, a new relationship, more money, holidays, or what have you. And it's not that those things cannot give us happiness, security, and so forth. Of course, if I'm going to have a piece of chocolate, I am going to feel this temporary happiness. If I'm going to get if I'm going to get a beautiful house, it is going to make me comfortable. I stayed, by the way, in the last few days, I stayed in a retreat at a beautiful apartment overlooking Roma Parkland at the center of Brisbane. Beautiful park, city center, very quiet, with a 25-meter swimming pool at the ground floor. It was amazing. And so I stayed there from Monday after the teaching, after the previous session finished. I went to that apartment. It belongs to a couple of friends that are now touring Europe. And I came back last night. And so over the time that I stayed in retreat, I have to kind of confess, I also had daily swims. But apart from having a daily swim in that really nice swimming pool, I also did a few sessions of meditation every day. Anyway, I was imagining how amazing it would be to inherit this apartment. And and to know how my life is going to be so much more comfortable, and I will have so much more freedom, and I will be able to design the apartment, in the way that I wanted to. So I already dedicated one room to be my altar room and kind of another room to be my guest room, and so on and so forth. I mean, attachment comes with that presentation that it's going to make my life so much more happier and comfortable, without thinking of, for example, staying in kind of, this is a prime location where this apartment is, without thinking that just to pay rates, body corporates rates, council rates, electricity, water, and so forth, in Australian terms, it's probably about, I guess, at least $15,000 a year. So, if I want to stay in a place like that, I need to get serious. I need to get to find a job that will earn me a regular income, to do a lot of maintenance. Of course, things break and fall apart, and you need to paint, and you have kind of neighbors which are sometimes disagreeable and blah blah blah. Anyway, then when you go overseas, you need someone to take care of the apartment. You need someone to house sit your apartment. You need then to when you come back, it's not clean to your satisfaction, or something got damaged, and so on and so forth. With a sense of attachment, we never think about the problems. We always think about the security, the happiness, the joy, the comfort that we're going to get with that. And so attachment is said to be kind of this superimposition of positive qualities, exaggeration of positive qualities, to make it kind of create that vision of 100% wonderful thing, no problems whatsoever. That's what I had in some of my meditation sessions, when I, instead of meditating what I should have been meditating on, I thought of how wonderful it would be if I could inherit that place. And so there is that sense that kind of these non-negative qualities in the object, it's 100% wonderful. It is said also in other texts that attachment is like a drop of oil that has seeped into a cloth, and it makes it impossible for us to remove that piece of oil from that cloth, to remove our mind, to break the link between our mind and the object of attachment. So I think that all of us can identify with that repeated thinking of something that we really want just around the corner, that will give us long-lasting happiness and satisfaction. Attachment is said to be one of the main engines of cyclic existence. Actually, when you look at the 12 links of dependent arising, in that mechanism of the 12 links of dependent arising, which is describing how from life after life after life, we, conditioned by ignorance, create causes that leave imprints on a mind stream, which at the end of our life are activated by attachment, and then cause us to take another birth in cyclic existence. So conditioned by attachment, those imprints are being activated. And so unless we apply antidotes to attachment, which means balancing out that incorrect mental attention, starting to recognize the disadvantage or disadvantages of attachment, the disadvantages of samsara, unless we're going to also look at the faults of the object, which means reduce that 100% seeing of positive qualities and no negative qualities. Unless we're going to do that, attachment will still be in full force. And so we have a list of meditations that we can do in order to reduce our attachment. So not often it is said, by the way, when we receive teachings from our Tibetan masters based on the Lamrim, and we keep it short, it is said that an antidote for attachment is meditating on the unattractive aspects of the object. And often the antidote is described from a point of view of monasticism. So thinking of Lama Tsongkhapa, thinking of Shantideva, in their text, they give ample instructions on how we meditate on unattractive aspects of the object, but often it is given from a certain perspective, and we need to really keep an open mind and to, we need to work hard, not only to listen to the teachings, but also make our mind work to extend it to other situations. And so often Shantideva, for example, in his Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, when he speaks of reducing attachment, he says, let's look at the body of another woman and find the unattractive aspects of in the body of another woman. It sounds a little bit maybe chauvinistic, patriarchal, and so forth. But no, we keep it in, well, I think about it in terms of the context. Teaching given by monks living in monastic societies, those are the things that challenges that they came up with. Then we can extend it to other things. Now we can extend it to, first of all, of course, not only to unattractive aspects of the body of a woman, but also just the same, even more so, I would say, the unattractive aspects of a male of body hair, and so forth. And so, I mean, maybe it's not unattractive, I don't know. But anyway, so unattractive aspects of the bodies of others, but also unattractive aspects of other things as well. Like, for example, thinking of unattractive aspects in relation to the food that we eat, what happens to the food when it's being digested, what happens to the food when it leaves the body, and so on and so forth. We can think of unattractive aspects in many different ways. Unattractive aspects of a car that we drive that seems to be this amazing, I want a Tesla. Thinking of, for example, the internal parts of Tesla, and I don't want to do anything with mechanics. I'm a failed mechanic in any possible way, not only with cars, but also with any other appliances. They scare me. I stay away from them. I don't like fixing things. I like buying things anew. And so I can think of unattractive aspects, things that kind of scare me, and also other things as well. All of those things balance this incorrect mental attention, in which I superimpose positive qualities on something, and I don't see any faults, anything that is unattractive. I'm running out of time here, but so what I want to do now is just to look at the list of 5 meditations that I mentioned with respect to attachment, and we will continue with that in our next session, and also look at other antidotes that we can apply in general. And so just going through that list. So meditating on the faults of samsara and the faults of attachment is one way to do it. Meditating on impermanence, and there are different levels of impermanence, like, for example, the impermanence of the thing that we are attached to. Could be another person, but it could be also a physical thing, that the things that we buy, the things that we consume are perishable. So one point or another will have to be separated from them. They'll either be weakened, they will break apart, they will break down, or we also going to die and have to be separated from them inevitably by death and impermanence. So that's another type of meditation. Meditating on the unattractive aspects of the object. This is what I've mentioned now. Meditating on selflessness, in that when an object of attachment appears to our mind, it seems as if in and of itself, it exists in a wonderful, amazing, inconceivable way. When we're trying to look for the wonderful thing, pleasurable thing within that, we cannot find it. So that can also be useful in order to reduce attachment. And another type of meditation is meditating on generosity. So an object of attachment, thinking that we are giving it away to others, being happy about giving it away to others, to the point that without any sense of loss, we are happily giving it away to others. It is helpful in terms of reducing attachment. It's also, in a more specific sense, it's helpful in terms of diminishing miserliness. But miserliness is a type of attachment. It is involved with attachment. Anyway, these are a few meditations that we can apply in order to reduce attachment. I think that we are out of time for today, so maybe we can leave it here for now, unless you have any comments or any question, last question. All right. And so let's leave it here for now. We're going to finish off with some dedication prayers, which I forgot to open. I'll just open the file. All right. So first of all, thank you very much for joining today. We're going to dedicate our virtue for the flourishing of our own bodhicitta and enlightenment, as well as the enlightenment of everyone else. We can also dedicate a merit for all the activities of Thupten Nobling Center that is providing Dharma teachings far and wide to so many other people, and also, of course, to all the people involved with the center. And so may the Supreme Jewel Bodhicitta that has not arisen, arise and grow. May that which is arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of the Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. And then to the long life and success of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. In the land encircled by Snow Mountain, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful and residents in Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. Saver of the Snowland teachings and transmigrated beings makes extremely clear the path of this unification of emptiness and compassion. To the lotus holder Tenzin Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And lastly, for the swift return of Kyabje Lama Sopa Rinpoche, you uphold the Sibyu's moral way, who says in the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Majina's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplished magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, savior of myself and others, your disciples, please come back to us quickly. All right, so thank you very much. All right, Karen is asking for my email address. Yes, so I'm writing it down here. I think that's my email address, right?
Yeah, if you don't want to give that out, it's fine. I just
No,
didn't know how to.
It's completely fine. yakiplat@yahoo.com. So YAKIPLATT@yahoo.com.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take
May
care.
you
Have a
live-
wonderful week.
Thank you. Wonderful.